So this is going to be your second lecture on this neuroanatomy. Last time what we saw was basics of neuroanatomy, the meninges, we saw the development of your CNS, we saw your cisterna, we saw some clinical significance also, like how we use the cisterna magna for the lumbar, your puncture. So this time we will be seeing somewhat more. We will see the spinal cord, the spinal segment, and a few more things. We will also see the classification of the neurons. Then we will see what are tracts, what is ganglia, what are nerves, what is nuclei. We will see the differences. Then we will see lemniscus and everything. We will also know somewhat more about the morphology of spinal cord. That is your conus medullaris, the phylum terminal, the cauda equina, and so on. So let's start with the spinal cord first. So as you know, the spinal cord is a part of your CNS, right? The CNS comprises of your brain and spinal cord. Brain, we will see it, from the school time, the brain has gray matter and white matter, which is going to be your eighth and ninth lecture. That is somewhat quite complicated. That's why I will take it later. But spinal cord is somewhat relatively more easy to understand. So let's see the spinal cord. So in a single word, if I want to say what is spinal cord, then spinal cord is the collection of neurons going or coming from the brain present as a whole tubular organ protected by central column. What do I mean with this? Suppose your friend slapped you. This information is going to reach you to your brain. So, neuron will go to your brain. And now you want to punch your friend. So, the information will come down your brain. So, if you repeat with millions of the neuron, this will make what? This will make a tuft of neuron appearing as a cylindrical structure, which is what we call the spinal cord. The spinal cord is nothing but the collection of neurons only, nothing else. Here, the neurons can make lemniscus, they can make fasciculus and everything, but they are only what? They are only the neurons. Unlike our brain, which has the capability to, think, to sense, to plan, or anything, our spinal cord doesn't have any. It is just ascending and descending neurons. I will go about it a bit in depth later, but let's talk more of the morphology of spinal cord. So length. In case of male, the average length of spinal cord is around 45 centimeter, and in case of female, the average length is going to be around 42 centimeter. I'm saying average, it means this is not fixed. It can be 43 in males also, or 46, or can be 45 in case of females also. But this is a average record. That is why we say statistics is not the accurate things, and average or mean of anything is not the actual representation. So average length in case of males 45, average length in case of females around 42 centimeter. If we talk about the weight of the spinal cord, this is very light. Like our brain is in kilograms, but spinal cord, this is around 30 to 35 grams only, not even in the 300. So 30 to 35 grams. Now, s- your spinal cord is protected by your vertebrae. So if this is your vertebrae, this is the central column, the spinous process. and your transverse process, and this is central column. If you arrange the central column of many spinous, if you arrange the central column of many of the vertebrae, they will form a canal-like structure that is known as spinal canal. And in this spinal canal, your spinal cord is present. Got it? So let's draw our spinal cord. So this is going to be your spinal cord. The spinal cord has a few thickening, uh, the thoracic and the lumbar enlargement, I will tell you. But you know, when you were in your embryonic stage or during the embryonic development, the length of your spine equals to the length of your spinal cord. But as you age, the length of the spine increases at a higher rate compared to the length of the spinal cord. That is why, if we talk about the extent of the spinal cord in case of neonates, that is from C1 vertebrae to the L3, remember, upper border. Suppose if this is the vertebrae and this is the spinous process, and so at this place, the spinal cord ends in case of neonate, C1 to L3. But in case of adults, this is going to be from C1 to L1. So why does this decrease in the two vertebrae happen? Let's see. This is C1 and this is L3. Okay, as in case of children. This is your vertebrae, or you can say this is your spine. I understand this teaching this in the two dimension is difficult, but I will try my best that you understand this. And this is your spinal cord. Now see, this is your embryonic development. So even the spine will grow at the same rate and your spinal cord also. But once the child is born, the child will the child's spinal cord and spine will grow at a different rate. Here, the spine will grow at a higher rate, but the spinal cord won't. So there will be a time, just remove this. There will be a time, for example, this reaches 4 feet and this only 3.8 feet. Got it? So during the embryonic development, the growth of the spine as well as the spinal cord was same, but after the birth, the spine grew at a higher rate compared to the spinal cord. That is why this shift happened in the new in just a second. In the neonate, the extent is from C1 vertebrae, or you can say the from the foramen magnum to what? L3 upper border. I will give you the notes, so don't worry. In case of adults, this extent is from C1 to L1. Here, this will be lower border. Got it? Now, I was saying something about the cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement. Some people say this is the thoracic enlargement, but no, this is your actually cervical enlargement because this is present in the neck. A few people say it thoracic enlargement because the nerves passes mostly from your axilla, from the thorax or the chest region lateral to it. So just a second. So suppose this is your cervical enlargement and this is going to be your lumbar enlargement. Got it? This will be from C3 to T2 and this one will be from L1 to S3. Got it? So why do we have, the cervical and the lumbar enlargement? See, the reason is actually this gives rise to your brachial plexus, and this gives rise to your lumbar plexus. If I draw a man, suppose this is a man, its trunk remains same, but at this two place, you know, there are appendages, and to supply this appendage, you have cervical enlargement, and to supply this enlargement, you have lumbar enlargement. So cervical enlargement will give rise to your cervical and the brachial plexus. And brachium means what? Your arm. So that plexus will be supplying your upper limb. And the lower part here, the L1 to S3, this one will be giving your lumbar and the sacral plexus. And those are responsible for what? Your lower limb and the relative structures. Got it? Don't worry about the notes. It will be present here. So besides, what do we have to discuss? Okay, now one more thing. If I say about the morphology, cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement of the spinal cord, the end of the spinal cord appears as what? This appears as the cone. That is why we call it conus medullaris. Got it? This is known as the conus medullaris. Now, here you will see from the end, many nerve fiber comes down. Why does it come down? Because, for example, this is C1 spinal segment and this is C1, C2 vertebrae. So its nerve will come through the intervertebral foramen. But if suppose this is your what vertebrae? Suppose this is your S2. Sorry, this is your S2 spinal cord. Where will be S2 spine? Sorry, S2 vertebrae here. So it will have to come down and descend. So the tuft of neuron comes down and gives it the appearance of horsetail. Got it? So this horsetail appearance is known as chorda equina. Chorda equina means what? Chorda means tail, equina means horse. Again, the vertebrae, the respective vertebrae, if I draw, then that will be somewhat like this. For example, from C1 to C7 level, you will have C1 to C8 spinal segment. What is spinal segment? I will tell you later. From T1 to T6, you will have T1 to T8 spinal segment. From T7 to T9 intervertebral foramen, you will have T9 to T12 spinal segment. From T10 to T12 intervertebral foramen, you will have L1 to L5 spinal segment. And here from T12 to L1, you will have S1 to S5. Now, do you see one thing? Here you have only the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae, but the spinal segment is here. So if I talk about the lumbar, your sacral vertebrae, then the sacral vertebrae will be somewhat here. So if it has to come down, if it has to come through their respective foramen, it needs to come down. That is why it gives this appearance of horse tail. Got it? Now, one more thing. Now, just tell me one thing. If this is present inside your vertebral, the spinal canal or the neural canal, it can go, it can go this side, or this side, but it doesn't, right? That is because we have extensions of pia mater. Those are known as ligamentum denticulatum. We also have one another modification. I will tell you about ligamentum denticulatum in a minute. We also have one more modification That modification is known as phylum terminal. Let's draw phylum terminal. See, from the apex of your conus medullaris, pia mater will come down and it will go and attach to your coccygeal vertebrae. Got it? This was just your pia mater. Now arachnoid and dura mater will also come. They will join. And now in this part, all of three are mixed. So can we see this as your phylum terminal interna, and can we say it as phylum terminal externa? Right? We can say it. So this will be your phylum terminal interna, and that will be your phylum terminal externa. Phylum terminal internus will be around 10 centimeter long, and this will be around 5 centimeter long. Got it? So total they will be 15 centimeter. Phylum terminal interna only comprises of the pia mater. Phylum terminal externa comprises of pia, dura, arachnoid as well. Now, as we are talking about, the meninges, let's complete the meninges. So we talked about, the dura mater, arachnoid matter, but we did not see the pia matter itself. So suppose this is your brain. The this furrow kind part that you see here, this is known as sulcus. See, the basic word, suppose this is mountain, and this is the surface of your brain. The mountains are known as gyrus, while the valleys are known as sulcus. So all of the elevation that you see here, these are gyruses, and all of the depressions that you see here, these are known as sulcus. So pia matter is very, very important, as well as specific, that it will be present over each and every part. For example, it will be present over it. It will go over all the gyrus. It will go over all the sulcus. So this is just present over it. You saw arachnoid matter. It had subarachnoid space. You also saw, your dura matter within your dural venous sinus at some places. But here, pia matter will be completely attached over it. It's like someone stuck it like with the help of Fevicol or something. So that is your pia matter. Now this pia matter has three modifications. First modification is linea splendens. Suppose this is your spinal cord. In the center, I will tell you about it. These are your gray horns. Got it? In the spinal cord, you have certain gyruses and the sulcus. And as I told you about the brain, that pia matter goes through all of the gyrus and the sulcus. It will be same here. It will go here, here, and it will fill this. Got it? It will fill all of the depressions. Here you will have fissures, and this filling is known as linea splendens. So pia matter is most serving meninges, and it will cover all of your gyri sulci fissure. Here in the spinal cord you have anterior median fissure, and it will be covered by what? It will be covered by pia matter, and this modification is known as linea splendens. Now coming to the second modification, this is known as ligamentum denticulatum. What is ligamentum denticulatum? Ligamentum denticulatum is nothing. Suppose this is your spinal cord. Your spinal cord can go this side or this side or this side. But in order to keep it, fixed at its place, you your pia matter forms these projections with teeth-like appearance. That is known as that is why it is known as ligamentum denticulatum. Denticulate means teeth, ligament means ligament. So they will be present like this. In the department of your anatomy, you also have this diagram, your schemes, the phantoms, and so on. If I show you this in this the transverse section, this will look somewhat like this. You will have it like this. This is going to be your ligamentum denticulatum. So this will connect it to the arachnoid matter, because you had arachnoid matter, and arachnoid matter had spaces. So to establish this connection between your pia matter and arachnoid matter, you have ligamentum denticulatum. See this. Suppose this is your spinal cord. This is your pia matter. And this is your arachnoid matter. And arachnoid matter has what? Subarachnoid space. So if there is subarachnoid space, your spinal cord can move it inside like this, right? But what if you attach it? Now this is no more free to move. Got it? So ligamentum denticulatum means a teeth-like ligament. Uh, got it? So a ligament which has serrations or the teeth-like appearance. Now, how many ligament you have? You have right and left ligamentum denticulatum. How many teeth have they have? Both of them have 21 teeth. Got it? They have 21 teeth. One more thing, your ligamentum denticulatum serves as the markings. Suppose you are a surgeon and you are going into surgery and you have to dissect, not dissect, suppose you have to dissect the lateral horn. How do you know? Suppose you are going from here, 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 or here. How do you know that your lateral horn will be here? If you go through this ligamentum denticulatum, you will know. So ligamentum denticulatum also serves as important surgical landmark, as it is present in the center of your lateral face. So this is a surgical landmark. We saw linea splendens, we saw phylum terminal, and we saw ligamentum denticulatum. This was your phylum terminal. So this is your basics. Now let's talk about the neurons. So what are neurons? These are the structural and functional unit of life. These neurons can be many many type. The classification include, apolar neuron, bipolar neuron, pseudo-unipolar neuron, multipolar neuron. But what does it mean? Let's see. The polar here, whether this is uni, bi, multi, or apolar. The polar represents the processes, the neurites. If I draw a neuron, this is a multipolar neuron. What are the structures it have? It has this cell body and it has neurites. Here you will have the dendrites and here you will have the axon. So whether you have one dendrite and one axon, this will be bipolar. If you have only a dendrite, then unipolar. So this is what the polar means. The polar means how many neurites you have. So if you have apolar, so only there will be cell body, there will be no neurite. If that is unipolar, it means only you will have one neurite. If you have pseudo unipolar, it means you will have one neurite which will divide into two parts. If you have bipolar, it will have one dendrite, one axon, and if you have multipolar, you will have many dendrites and you will have one axon. Got it? If we talk about the examples, so the apolar neurons are found where? Apolar neurons are found in the lower kingdom. For example, the coelentrates, the ctenophora, the animal kingdom, the classification. So that is your apolar. If we talk about unipolar, then unipolar neurons are not found in human beings. Then you have your pseudo-unipolar neuron. This is found in the dorsal root ganglia. Remember, dorsal root ganglia. I will tell you what does it mean. And then if I talk about the bipolar, then the bipolar is present where the rod cells, the cone cells. And if I talk about multipolar neurons, your cranial nerves, the neurons of your cranial nerves, your spinal nerves, and the most of the nerves of your body has this neuron. Now, I just told you most of the nerve has this neuron. What does it mean? Nerves and neurons are different? Yes, that is different. Suppose I'm drawing this is cytone and this is the dendrite. Guys, when I draw any diagram, focus because you know your teacher might not understand your language. Your teacher might not have time to listen to you, or you might be afraid to tell him. But if you draw a diagram, he will know that you know the concept for sure. Got it? So always draw a diagram even if there is not. That is why I always draw diagrams and I always explain it with you. So if you see this, this is your cell body. And what you see here, this is your neurites. Got it? So this is one neuron. Copy this, paste. This is two, this is three, and so on. So suppose this is one neuron, this is another neuron, this is another neuron, this is another neuron, this is another. And these are their cell bodies, right? These are the cell body. Now, if we see it from far away, does it appear somewhat like this? Right? Again, see it. So, this is the reason why I told you nerve has neuron. So, a nerve is a bunch of neurons, right? So, now, there is also one more thing. It's not that simple. In a nerve, a neuron, I told you, it has, the cell body and the neuroids. We collectively call the neurites as something else and we collectively call the cell body as something else. Here, all the cell body, collection of cell body will be what? The collection of cell body will be known as nuclei. If that is CNS, it means inside the brain and spinal cord. And if this is, the peripheral nervous system or any of your cranial or the facial nerves, then that would be your what? Ganglia. Collection of cell body. But if we talk about the collection of axons, then this is known as nerves in case of peripheral nervous system. For example, cranial nerves, your spinal nerves. But if that is central nervous system, that is known as tracts. For example, dorsal column tracts. For example, spinocerebellar tract. For example, tectospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, many. Got it? So now I think you have this understanding what is tract and what is neuron. And now coming to this part, suppose this is your brain. Your friend hit you, right? This was the axon and this is the cell body. Multiply this with 1,000 times and now this neuron has been converted into what? Nerve. So spinal cord brought the information. Inside the spinal cord, second order neurons will take this information to the brain. Don't worry, this is just oversimplification, right? This was your spinal cord taking the information to your brain. If I do it again, so this was your tract, this was your nerve. So a nerve comprises of many neurons, but what if there are many nerves? Those collection of many nerves are known as lemniscus, also known as fasciculus. So There were neurons. Many neurons came together, they formed nerves in the CNS tracts. Many tracts will come together and they will form the lemniscus, also known as fasciculus. For example, there will be median lemniscus, spinal lemniscus, trigeminal lemniscus, lateral lemniscus, and so on. So neurons, tracts, lemniscus. Neurons has cyton as well as the neurites. The collection of the neurites or the axon forms the tracts, right? Collection of tracts form what? Lemniscus. And collection of these lemniscus are known as what? Spinal cord. Got it? That is why I told you in the beginning, this is not so much simple. You might understand this is spinal cord, but what is spinal cord? You might not know. So spinal cord is nothing but only and only the axons. However, again, this is not so much simple. You remember I told you inside the spinal cord, the neurons are taking in the information and then from here it is going above. So when the information is brought here inside the spinal cord and is taken above, so there will be this, the nuclei, the collection of the cell body, again nuclei, and they will give the spinal cord as gray appearance. That is why when you see the spinal cord, you see these horns. Got it? I will take the image, don't worry. So horns are what? Horns are the collection of your gray, horns are the collection of your nuclei. In simple word, the spinal cord has two parts. What are the two parts? See, this might be complicated, but this is because of the explanation. I can just simply see what's written on the notes, but that would be more of the rata part, right? So listen to me, whatever I'm saying, just listen carefully, and then when you go through the notes, everything will be, fixed to your brain. So, spinal cord, as you know, has two parts: the white matter and the gray matter. The white matter comprises of the neurons, which is either going to the brain or whether it is coming from the brain, and the gray matter comprises of the cell bodies of the neurons. Here, for example, your sensory neuron took the information and they will be present in the form of gray matter, and the gray matter has butterfly like appearance. Got it? Now let's take the, just a second. See, this is what I was talking about, the chorda equina and everything. You see here the spinal cord ended at the medullary cone, and then the spinal nerves are coming down to come out of their respective foramen. Now here we will discuss two things: what is spinal segment and what is the gray and white matter. So just a second. So this is your spinal cord. As you see, all the features, the sulcus and everything. Talked about it earlier. Now see, this is a spinal nerve. The spinal nerve has two branches, the posterior branch and the anterior branch. The anterior branch and posterior branch. Why? Why a single nerve has two branches? The reason is the sensory information will come from the posterior horn, will come here. Here you will have the gray matter, which is the collection of cell body. The second order neuron will arise and it will go from here. So all of your spinal nerves are mixed nerves. Why? Because they comprises of sensory as well as motor neurons. Got it? So if I talk about the spinal segment, what does the spinal segment means? The spinal segment means a part of spinal cord or a section of spinal cord containing gray matter, the white matter, and a pair of spinal nerves. That is your spinal segment. Got it? So this is your spinal segment. Now one more thing. Let's discuss the gray and white matter specifically. Suppose this is your gray matter. Can you see that you have three horns? One, two, and three. Do you see that you have three pairs of horns? Horns are what? These are the extensions of the gray matter which are spread laterally to your white matter. So these are known as posterior horn. This is known as lateral horn and this is known as anterior horn. So sensory information will come to your posterior horn. If that is a three neuron reflex, one interneuron will come to your anterior horn, and then here again another motor neuron will come out. So can we say the posterior horn as sensory horn and our anterior horn as motor horn, right? But what about the lateral horn? The lateral horn, first of all, is not present entirely. Like this is present only in the region where you have sympathetic and the parasympathetic ganglia. So here, this will give rise to this horn. This will come here, and you will have this sympathetic ganglia. This will have two horns, white and gray horn. This will go inside. This will synapse. Sorry, I just drew it wrong. This will go inside. It will synapse, and then it will come out. Got it? So this is our three horns. Now, this is basics. I will talk about it later. Now, can you also appreciate that the white matter is now also divided in posterior, anterior, and the lateral part? So can we say the spinal cord has gray matter and white matter? Gray matter comprises of the axons of ascending and descending neurons or tracts, right? White matter, sorry, उल्टा लिख दिया मैंने. While the gray matter comprises of what? The gray matter is going to comprise your cell bodies, right? This is going to comprise your gray matter and your white matter. Now this gray matter is divided into three horns: anterior horn, posterior horn, and the lateral horn. Anterior horn is motor horn, posterior horn is your sensory horn, and lateral is for the sympathetic nervous system. Now if we talk about the white matter, this is also divided into anterior column, posterior column, and the lateral column. Got it? Now let's talk about each and every horn separately. Suppose this is your posterior horn. Posterior horn will have, the cell bodies, but the cell bodies collection, we call it what? Nuclei, right? Don't call the gray matter. The collection of the nuclei is going to form your gray matter. So here you will have primarily four kind of nuclei. First, this is known as the substantia gelatinosa. Let's write about it. Let's draw this horn. This is known as your substantia gelatinosa. Substantia gelatinosa is present throughout the length of spinal cord. Why? Because they receives the fibers for pain, temperature, touch. Got it? Touch will include your both fine touch as well as your crude touch. That is why this is present throughout the length. Now there is another this nuclei of the posterior horn. This nuclei is known as nucleus proprius. Nucleus proprius, as it contains the name proprius. Proprius means what? Proprioception. Proprioception means what? It means the sense of the balance. So this will again present throughout the length of your spinal cord. This is the largest nuclei present entire length of spinal cord, and it receives what? Yes, conscious proprioception. Now, what does conscious proprioception and unconscious proprioception means? Suppose you are walking on sides of street. On the sides of street you have this elevation. So these elevations, when you are walking, you have to balance your body. So that balance is done consciously. That is known as conscious proprioception. But when you are walking on the road, do you have to balance your body consciously? No. That happens itself. That is known as your subconscious proprioception. So this was your second nuclei. Now there will be another nuclei here, and this nuclei is known as what? This nuclei is known as nucleus dorsalis. That is why present more dorsally. Let's write about the nucleus dorsalis. Nucleus dorsalis. Now, this is going to carry only the unconscious proprioception. Now, tell me one thing, unconscious proprioception is needed where? Where you are using your lower limbs. It means this will be present in the spinal cord only in the lower level. So this is present from the T8 to T8 to L3 spinal segment and not the vertebrae. Remember, this is present from T8 to L3 spinal segment. That is your nucleus dorsalis. Now, there will be another nuclei in the posterior horn, and the name of the nuclei is, yes, that is visceral afferent nuclei. As the name suggests, just a second, visceral afferent nuclei. Visceral means what? Organs. Afferent means what? Which is coming towards you. It means this is sensory, and nuclei means nuclei. So this will be carrying this will be receiving the sensation from the visceral organs. Got it? And this also is not present, throughout the length of your spinal cord. This is only present from T1 to L2, from S2 to S4. Got it? Why is that? Yeah, later I will tell you. This is your sympathetic and parasympathetic. So visceral sensation is carried by your sympathetic as well as parasympathetic nervous system. That is why it is extended from the L1 to L2 and the S2 to S4. So we saw the spinal segment, we saw the nuclei of the posterior horn, and now this comes to the lateral horn and the anterior horn. Before I come to the lateral and anterior horn, make sure that you never forget about the functions of these nuclei, because when I will talk about the tracts which is carrying the conscious proprioception, those first order neuron is going to come to that nucleus proprius. If the tract is carrying sensation of the pain and temperature, that first order neuron will come to this nuclei. If the first order neuron or the sensory neuron is carrying, pressure, then that will be going to come to that nuclei. Got it? So that is your dorsal horn. Now let's talk about the lateral horn. Now, I told you already that the lateral horn contains what? Sympathetic and the parasympathetic uh, nuclei. So this will be present only from T1 to L2 for the sympathetic, and for the parasympathetic S2 to S4. So it will contain the nuclei only from T1 to L2 and S2 to S4. So sympathetic and the for the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. Actually, that is mixed. So you can say the spinal nerves containing the sympathetic and parasympathetic neurons. So for the lateral horn, that's enough. Now, if we talk about the ventral horn, now the ventral horn is slight, special. Why is it special? Because in the lateral horn, you will see a pair of lateral and a pair of medial nuclei and a central nuclei. This pair of lateral nuclei of anterior horn is going to supply limb muscles. So remember L for lateral, L for limb. Because this is anterior horn. It means this is a motor horn. It means if your friend is going to slap you, the sensation of the pain is going to your substantia gelatinosa of the posterior horn. Now there will be an interneuron, and interneuron will come here, and here this will give rise to what? Motor neuron. And this motor neuron is going to supply to your limbs so that you can beat him. So this is going to what? Nuclei. This is going to the lateral nuclei of the anterior horn. And remember, lateral nuclei is not one, but that is a pair. So a pair of lateral nuclei of anterior horn, which is going to supply your limb muscle. That is an analogy, and remember it. Now there is intermediate nuclei. So why do we call it intermediate? Because this is present in between of the lateral and medial nuclei. And this is going to give rise to your phrenic nerve. Phrenic means diaphragm. So this is going to give rise to your phrenic nerve, where from C3 to C5, and this is going to give rise to your spinal accessory nerve from C1 to C5. It means for these nerves, the nuclei is situated in intermediate part of your anterior horn, or you can say the motor nuclei of the phrenic nerve and the spinal accessory nerve is situated in the intermediate nuclei of the anterior horn. So that is lateral nuclei of anterior horn, intermediate nuclei of anterior horn, and the medial nuclei of anterior horn. Now, as it say medial or mid line. So what does it mean? Suppose this is your body, your head, your neck, your upper limb, and your lower limb. I told you your lateral horns will supply the limbs. Your diaphragm is supplied by the your intermediate. But this medial pairs of the nuclei is going to supply your midline. Not the head and neck head part, the neck and the head and your axis, or you can say head and neck and your trunk. So midline nuclei going to supply your axial muscles or the midline muscles. For example, your intercostal muscles, the abdominal muscles, and so on. So this was your spinal cord and the rest of this discussion. I think this is going to be the basics. And remember, guys, this is just the basics. Like, I haven't even started the neuroanatomy. And sorry for 2 days lecture, it was quite late. The thing is, I had my classes. I just came at around 8:30 from the university, and then basic course, and I had to record lecture, and that's why it got late because of those things. So we talked about spinal cord length and width, and we talked about growth, morphology, meninges, modifications, neurons, classification, tracts, nerve, nuclei, ganglia, structure of spinal cord. We also talked about, the neurons arrangement, the spinal segment, the TS of spinal cord, the gray and white matter. Now, one more thing. Uh, Suppose this is your spinal cord. This is the horn. And one more thing, guys, if I told you that your lateral horn is containing nuclei only in the T1 to L2 and S2 to S4, it means at other places you will not have your lateral horn. So only places where you need sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves or the neurons, only that place have lateral horn. Other places don't even have the horn. Got it? So suppose this is your spinal cord, the nuclei, the columns we call the white part of the spinal cord. We have three columns, right? So the first order neuron is carrying the sensory sensation. It came to your posterior horn. It gave rise to your interneuron. It came to anterior horn, and it gave rise to your motor neuron. And this comprises your single spinal nerve. Got it? This is known as three neuron reflex. This was your first order neuron that is carrying the sensation or the sensory impulse. This is your interneuron, which is carrying the information from posterior to the anterior horn. And then there is your motor horn, which is carrying the motor impulses. Got it? If this was only this, if this was only two motor, only two neuron reflex, then there was no interneuron, and the sensory and the motor neurons would have been connected by themselves. Now, suppose your friend slapped you and you beated him, or your friend tried to punch you in the eyes and you closed it. That was a reflex. Got it? Suppose your mom came to hit you and you pulled your hand. That was a reflex. But reflex did happen at the level of spinal cord, but you also felt it, right? So it means that impulses are going not in a reflex pattern, but also is going to the brain so that you can sense it. So yes, this first order neuron will form the synapse. This is going to form synapse. Just a second. I'm using the color blue. This is going to form synapse, and then it will go to the brain. This will be your second order neuron. Okay. While it goes to the brain, there will be one more thing. You have heard this that your left brain controls right part of the body and right brain controls the left part of the body. While that is mostly true. So what will happen is the neuron which was going to the brain, this will also change the side. Yes. Second order neuron, which arises from the posterior horn, will change the side and this will ascend. This process is known as the decussation, and this decussation can happen at the level of spinal cord or it will go to the level of brainstem. Brainstem comprises of pons, your medulla oblongata, and the midbrain. So it will go at the level of brainstem or it can decussate here also. So decussation is the changing of the side of the second order neuron. It can happen at the level of spinal cord as well as at the level of brain stem, that is decussation. When it has decussated and it went to the brain stem, there will be many tracks. For example, this was second order neuron. This was for pain, another for something else, there another for something else. So there will be many axons, right? So this axon will form tract, collection of axons as tract. These tract will reach the brainstem, and the collection of tract is going to form lemniscus here, as I had told you. So only thing which I want to teach you here is that your first order neuron will carry the sensory impulses to the posterior horn. From the posterior horn, second order neuron will arise. Second order neuron can decussate at the level of your spinal cord or at the level of brainstem, and then it will go to the brain. One more thing, it won't go to the brain directly. If you send a letter to your friend, the letter as well as no one knows where it has to go. Only when it reaches the post office reads all the information and then sends it to different places. Similarly, your tract, your ascending tract or the sensory tract, which is carrying information from spinal cord to the brain, can carry the sensation of pain, pressure, temperature, touch, or anything. Your brain has different area for different thing, right? So it has to go here, 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 or here. How can it differentiate to which that where to send which information? So you have something known as subcortical center. Sub means below, cortical means cortex. So there will be center below your cortex known as thalamus. So the tract will go here, and then from here they will go to different places as it is required. So this was your second order neuron, and these are known as corona radiata or the third order neuron. Got it? Let me show you here. In this diagram, you can see, just let's just take the screenshot. So see, here we had our first order neuron. It took the sensory information. It went to the level of brainstem. Actually, this is a complicated example for you to understand. Let's try this one because there the second order neuron doesn't come there, but somewhere else. So copy. So this will be good for you to understand. So you can see that the first order neuron came to the dorsal horn, right? Second order neuron started from here and it is changing the side. It means it is decussating. It went through the brainstem, and here you see they are forming the lemniscus. It will go through the brainstem, the second order neuron, and it will reach the thalamus, which is the subcortical organ. At the thalamus, third order neuron will start, and these third order neuron will send it to different part of cortex as it is needed, and these are known as thalamic radiation. So first order neuron carries sensory impulse, second order neuron carries that impulse from the spinal cord to the subcortical center. From subcortical center, the information is carried to the cortex with the help of your thalamic radiations or the third order neuron. That is it for today, guys. So we studied the basics and the rest, and the next class would be sensory tract, the motor tract, and everything. And one more thing, guys, neuroanatomy is very simple at the same time very complicated. If you give your focus, if you give your attention, you will understand it in a single time. But if you don't do it, it will take even months for you to understand even the basics. Try understanding everything by yourself because no teacher, no notes, no books itself is going to teach you unless you try to understand how everything is connected, how everything is functioning. For me, I studied, those Snell's clinical neuroanatomy, the Vishram Singh. But even till date, when I think about it, I know, oh, that is why it's like this. That is why it's like this. And it is not, it wasn't in the book. So please do one thing, watch my lectures, read the notes. My lectures are, uh, concept part. But that is not, I am not giving the lectures in a series. I am taking this part, this part, this part, whichever is needed for, a consolidated memory. So that is use that for understanding, and after that, go to the notes. You will understand each and every single thing. After you go through the notes, when you get time, read any standard medical textbook, whether it's Snell's or Vishram Singh. Got it? So study. Don't waste your time by doing something else or studying a single subject more. I won't recommend you to go through, I leave the recommendation. I won't even tell you to read neuroanatomy from all the books. No. One lecture, one PDF, and one book is more than enough. You don't have to study five books for a single subject. Otherwise, you won't have time for other subjects. If you want to read different books of a single subject, then do this thing. Osteology from this book, who has the best osteology, neurology from this, planknology for this. I also did the same because a student actually came to me and she was asking about multiple books for single subject, and she also had this PDF for this subject, this topic from here and there. So do it and let me know if you come up with any doubt. Have a great day. Good night.